everybody, Adam B. Levine here. As the launch of LTB Coin approaches, there are some basic steps we ask everyone to take in preparation for our network token. Members of the audience, if you'd like to receive some coins set aside for the initial community, please get involved at forum.ltbcoin.com. People who have more than 5 posts before launch will receive some of the first audience coins. To use the combined Bitcoin LTB coin wallet, visit counterwallet.co, counterwallet.co. If you've written an article or posted an episode for LTB in the last year, just keep it up. We've got you covered. If you plan to create content for LTB but haven't so far, now's an excellent time to jump in and be ready when the weekly distribution starts. The new letstalkbitcoin.com is basically done, and we're getting ready to spin up the first 10 or so LTB blogs to feed the new front page. If you're running a show for LTB now or would like to run one of the first curated blogs, please contact Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com for further instructions. Would-be LTB coin speculators, thank you for your interest. If you'd like to purchase LTB coins as soon as they're available, you can place your orders on counterwallet.co's distributed exchange, selling XCP or BTC and buying LTB coin. LTB won't be selling any of these coins. They're just our internal token system distributed to our community based on how much they contribute. But you're welcome to buy them from someone who will sell them to you. Back to the show.
Those are the kinds of decisions that you don't even notice. They're not really affirmative choices to do something specific. They're more choices to not pursue a specific activity because it's too controversial. So those are areas where you'd see that problem.
I have a problem with the fact that Mike Hearn was collaborating with the Dutch police on how to shut down Silk Road. That for me is like.
Well, so let's get into this. Let's talk about Silk Road for a second, because you bring up Silk Road a lot when I hear you talk. And
it's
again,
amazing.
I think that people have this idea in their head that Silk Road equals illegal stuff. And I think that when you talk about it, it's more Silk Road equals non-restricted markets, free markets, as opposed to markets that have arbitrary limitations.
What is the internet all about? Why is the internet so great? It's because it busted the lid off of the restrictions that empower people.
Yeah, the gatekeepers
freely
took them away.
Yeah, and why do we have this cognitive dissonance about markets that somehow, if everybody had the ability to trade, that we'd all start raping each other and murdering each other and selling poison? No, we'd sell food and...
No, in fact, the drugs
poison is under FDA approval and it's sold by giant pharmaceuticals.
Monsanto, and we eat it every day, yeah.
I think there's a great argument to say that the Silk Road actually made recreational drug use a lot safer for many people because
I lived with drug dealers, violent drug gangsters, yeah. They were beating people with metal bars, breaking their bones.
Yeah.
Vicious people, really shitty people, yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can't stub someone over IP.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, yeah, it's like, how come these guys exist, yeah, for a plant that anybody can grow, like a weed, but we don't have the same problem for potato farmers, you know, for potatoes?
Yeah, it's because it's criminalized, of course.
Exactly.
And so if you can go on the internet and you can buy something on a unrestricted marketplace, it's probably going to be way better because it's taken out of that realm of the black market where anything like that can happen.
And you can't be stabbed over TCP/IP.
But the flip side of this, all of this is, it's hilarious. I get to play this guy. It's illegal. They'll put you in jail. So, I mean, that's why you have all this stuff.
And so was being gay, and so was women's rights, and, you know...
In some places it is still.
So was coffee. For 150 years, coffee was considered a gateway drug that would lead to the destruction of morality in society, that destroyed your children, turned them into...
Earth was not the center of the universe.
Turned them into shaking, crazed people who would stab people because they drank too much coffee. This is true. You could look it up. It was banned in Holland for 150 years. Yeah, if I have too much coffee, I do sometimes get a bit crazed.
Grains of truth.
But I still haven't stabbed anyone because of it, though.
No.
Although that would make a good defense. I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just had too much espresso.
It's also like why in America as well, that America's need for cocaine is funding huge amounts of death in Ecuador, the highest murder rates in the world, between these massive drug gangs satisfying a need of wealthy Americans to take a crappy generic drug that really doesn't bring anything to your consciousness or your well-being, It's ludicrous. This war on drugs is just helping politicians to get more and more political capital, helping fund more and more militaries and police.
Oh, and like the people who enforce these laws,
drug gangsters.
Well, that's the thing. The Silk Road and markets like that, the most important target, or the ones who are most threatened by those markets, are the drug cartels.
Yeah,
they are threatened more than anyone else. If you have those free markets, there is no longer a need to have the drug cartels. So that's the cognitive dissonance there. Here's something that actually could be effective in stopping the drug cartels and violence all around the world, rather than the drug war, which is fueling those things.
That's a great point about the hypocrisy. I was just going to make another point about that, which is that the people who enforce these laws, they don't follow them. You know, tell me the cop that arrests the 20-year-old kid for getting drunk in the U.S. never took a sip of alcohol before he was 21, or that he never smoked pot. Really? Come on. It's crap. I mean, what were you saying, Adam, about like the Silk Road and how Amir talks about the Silk Road?
Well, just that, again, we're talking about unrestricted markets versus arbitrarily restricted markets. It doesn't, again, it's that whole borders thing. If borders matter, then restrictions matter. If borders don't matter, then why do restrictions matter? Because you can be anywhere you want. So again, it's all this, the idea that morality is local is probably not a terrible one, but the idea that morality dictating laws for entire populations based on locality is probably not a great idea, and I think in practice it's been pretty bad.
You think the idea that morality is local is not a bad idea?
Well, it depends how local you mean it. My values are different than your values, Stephanie, and I don't think that you need to have this. We don't need to have the same values.
No,
so again,
not values. Not values, but like certain, like murder is not okay in some places in the world, right?
Okay, so again, we're talking about natural law versus laws of men. I agree with you.
I just wanted to get clear on that because it sounded like...
Sorry, yeah, again, it's been a long couple of days.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, again, there is definitive good and bad, and I think that there are certainly shades of gray, but there are some things that are kind of basic. You don't steal, you don't kill people, you don't, it's basically initiations of force. It's basically, doing something that impacts someone else in a way that they don't want and without their permission. Again, if we have relationships that are essentially based on two-way voluntary interactions, then there's no such thing as a bad deal, because a bad deal is just a deal that doesn't happen.
Right.
So isn't the US meant to be the land of the free?
Well, it was at one point, but again...
But all the export restrictions and all that.
No, that's just a story for children.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I've been thinking about this a lot. So I watched a movie on the way up here to Canada. It was, I actually watched two movies. One was Anchorman 2, but the better one was
how can you top that?
The Hunger Games sequel, Catching Fire. And not a tremendously good movie either, but the thing that it sort of made me realize was that the problem isn't that people can have success or people can have victory, but once you've done that, during the interim, where you have that I am the success, you have this urge to try and leverage victory or success into entitlement. And so entitlement is just victory that lasts forever. And, you've done it once, or you might have to reestablish it periodically. But the point is that it's work you did way before. You're not doing it anymore, but yet you still want the reward for having done that work, and you want it to continue to go to you because you did it way back then. Military is exactly the same thing. You look at the history of world currencies, and there are periods of 120 to 220 years where the world reserve currency is one particular nation's currency. It's not because they're the most economically viable nation, it's because they have the biggest military. And so in the beginning, it might have been because they were the best option, but at the end, it's not because they're the best option, it's because they have the biggest military. And eventually, the mismatch of those two things causes a collapse and a realignment, but it takes hundreds of years to get from here to there. And so again, like with cryptocurrency, I really think what we've done, and it's all of these decentralized things, when you can't stop technology, you can't have monopolies. And that's really, again, the thing I think that has happened here, is that the ability to perpetuate a monopoly is gone. And I don't think it comes back.
It's going away.
It is individual empowerment, but that's the thing, is that you can't stop it. So if you can't stop something, if you can't enforce the monopoly, then there is no monopoly. People haven't recognized this yet. We don't realize it yet. We don't act like it yet. But in practice, this is already done.
Yeah, it takes several decades for that kind of change.
Maybe it takes several decades.
The reason it takes several decades, though, is because it's in people's minds. You know, like people aren't thinking they're not used to thinking that oh, we're free from monopolies? Really? It's like someone's in a cage and you unlock the door, but they don't know it's unlocked and they just stay in there.
See, but that's the thing, though, is that this would be true if we didn't live in the world that we live in today. But that cage is getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and it's forcing people to try that door that they hadn't tried before. You know, if you're no longer vested,
the situation is polarizing.
Exactly, and it forces people. You know, again, the pie is shrinking. So since the pie is shrinking, it means more and more people aren't getting any pie. And if you don't have any pie in the current system, why not go to a system where there's more opportunity? Mm-hmm. So again, like lacking this sort of pressure coming from the real world out there, these opportunities, you know, I'm not sure if I would be here. Actually, I know I wouldn't be here. I never would have learned about money. I never would have cared about any of this stuff because I was happy doing what I was doing until I wasn't, you know? And then suddenly you're disenfranchised and you're like, what happened? You learn about it and you're like, oh, well, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They get to steal everything and get away with it.
Well, you know, again, like, and again, if there's nothing here for me, then why do I care about it? What investment do I have? It costs me and gives me nothing.
Are you trying to imply that you're not fully vested in your IRA and 401k to build your stable future?
I had the opportunity to add to an IRA and 401k for 2 years, and my grandparents were very much recommended that I did, and I did not. But
that's fantastic.
That's why with the Silk Road, it's like, those are your users. So why are you acting against your own users? And as developers, you know, who are you representing? You know, are you representing peer-to-peer transfers, small businesses, the black market, or are you representing corporate interests? Efforts to legitimize Bitcoin, you know, to regulate and put controls and limits, put Bitcoin in a framework, you know?
Well, I mean, there have to be... I think it's okay to have a broad range of opinions. And Bitcoin as a platform supports that broad range of opinions.
But
if you want to create,
are backed by a gun.
If you want to build something at the end point that looks very much like a bank and operates like a bank, you're going to attract a certain number of people who are going to want that.
You know, Bitcoin.
But let's be thankful for having people like Amir who expand that range of opinions and give us alternatives. You have to make conscious choices when you're choosing software. But choosing politics.
Developing blacklists and technologies to surveil people.
That's what I was talking about.
Bitcoin is subject to
there's some that you can't opt out of.
Inside.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like opting in is fine.
Well, you can opt out of it, though, because if Bitcoin does develop blacklists, we can opt out of Bitcoin and move to another coin.
Not necessarily if Bitcoin becomes, if enough of the infrastructure that the network depends upon becomes co-opted in some ways, you know, and it's not that there's going to be a backdoor put into Bitcoin or so on. It's more about like the day-to-day decisions, A or B, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of these decisions are very difficult to decide between. You know, there's different trade-offs, you know, and if your motive is slightly corrupted, you might choose choice A, which slightly more favors corporations and the black market. And then next time, you know, another A or B, and lots of small steps. Bitcoin ends up becoming GovCoin or CorpCoin, very different from the Bitcoin, the principles of Satoshi, you know, as encoded. But
here's the thing. You've now opened the door to hundreds and hundreds of currencies and created a world where currency is a choice and not a monopoly. And that means that if Bitcoin becomes GovCoin, unlike leaving the dollar to enter Bitcoin, for example, which is a very, very hard move, leaving Bitcoin to go to black coin or something else is a lot easier.
Why don't you buy that argument?
Because, you know, the internet is the one internet we use. We're not using alternate darknets, you know?
But we are using alternate darknets on top of the internet. There are people who want to go
on top of the internet, you know? Yes. But like with Bitcoin, this is a system that is here, it's got the first mover, the network effects, and it's going to establish itself a lot more. And the fight really is for the consensus of that system. Mm-hmm. How do we want that consensus to move? Do we want a consensus that favors the people? Or do we want a consensus that favors, you know, trusted operators? Mm-hmm. I prefer a Bitcoin which is open and inclusive to everybody. Mm-hmm. And sure, people can use alternate currencies and people will use them and they're very good, you know. But Bitcoin is the one system that is going to be very dominant for a long time to come, you know.
I think we're going to disrupt Bitcoin again in 20 years with something else. But I don't necessarily buy that once you open the door and people have understood that currency itself is a choice, and you've got transnational currencies, and now you're appealing to a population that is global. You've got the other 6 billion who have vested interests in keeping this out of the hands of the people who stole their land and stole their future in the past. Why would they make a choice to tie themselves to something and not be able to leave?
Because it's got established infrastructure, because it's got liquidity of the market.
But the infrastructure is pretty lightweight and it's easy to move in and out of. It's not infrastructure that's bricks and mortars, it's virtual infrastructure. And we can very easily build alternative infrastructures.
People can easily switch to Google Plus or
right, exactly.
Networks.
I was thinking that, like, try to leave Facebook, you know.
I left Facebook in 2010. It was quite easy.
Yeah, but you're still on Facebook because someone has a fan page for you. I mean, it's like...
Well, I'm not on Facebook. I post nothing about myself, and I don't have any friends on Facebook. I don't have any connections.
I'm not on Facebook, but undeniably a lot of people are, and they're held there by their friends.
There's a lot of pressure.
I understand.
Yeah. And if you're using Bitcoin and getting paid in Bitcoin, or your favorite sites use Bitcoin, there's going to be some friction there.
I'm really optimistic. I mean, I used to think that we'd never get rid of Windows and Microsoft. We were locked into that yes, but we were locked into that for 20 years. I think if you say it's worse, you don't remember very well what it was like to be locked into an ecosystem.
It's different, really, because it's like a piece of software that you use. It's like a video editing software. I can download it. I can use it. It doesn't matter what other people are doing.
Oh, before Linux, it did matter very much so. And I remember that time. I remember the time when there were no other operating systems, and you were either locked in to Microsoft Windows, or the alternative was IBM AIX Unix, or other forms of very, very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars Unix. That broke open. I never thought we would leave that monopoly. Yeah. I don't think Facebook is that stable or long-lasting as people think.
We also switched from Internet Explorer, you know?
Yeah, I mean...
all the sites were developed for it.
Exactly.
As well,
And what
so
kind of holds...
hope, but still,
because disruption keeps happening. That is the central theme. Disrupt everything.
Okay, but so the friction here, I think, is the primary issue that you guys are having. So doesn't this seem like it's a lack of tools to make this happen? Because again, I've been thinking about this future that we have coming, where there are going to be at least many, many user-created assets built on top of Bitcoin, if not many, many just cryptocurrencies, broadly speaking. And it seems like it's inevitable, and Ripple already has done this to a certain extent, to have something like an automatic interchange wallet where basically you say, I only ever want to accept Bitcoin, and then regardless of what anybody pays you, on the back end your wallet is trading it for whatever you want, but on the front end you get whatever you want. And when you pay somebody, their wallet's doing the same thing. They only want Doge, or they only want this one particular user-created asset. That's fine. It can be converted at market rate into that. So, I mean, it just seems like this there's a little lock-in with Bitcoin. People are in other cryptocurrencies already, so it's not like everyone feels like they have to just stay in Bitcoin already. But adding a tool layer like that seems like it kind of removes all of the user irritation, and it just becomes about preference, right?
Well, that's the third step in the maturity curve. You start with experimentation. We had that with Bitcoin. You move to fragmentation. We've seen that now happening with the emergence of all the altcoins. Then you have standardization. You create unifying interfaces that hide the differences, that allow you to do multimodal communication. Like, at first you had email, then you had email, Twitter, IM, and Facebook. Then you had a single interface on your phone that allowed you to communicate over all four, so you can seamlessly move among them. And then you start optimizing. That's a natural progress curve. We're at the fragmentation point. At the moment, we need lots of different opinions. And at some point, we can then move between them more fluidly by standardizing the interfaces on top of that. And a lot of that, Amir, is going to happen in the user interface. That's really where the eyeballs and the users are going to land, the ones who don't have the technical experience. So building those capabilities like Airbits is doing, or other companies are doing, is going to be critical, because if all of the front-end user interfaces make it easy for you to fluidly move among coins, then there's no lock-in. That's where the lock-in happens. The lock-in happens in the mind of the user, and the user gets used to a single user interface.
My concern is about where, so not only about changes to fundamental Bitcoin, but about where efforts of developers become invested. Mm-hmm. Like there is like, half the scientists around the world work for the military. And the same with the internet. You see there's a lot of investment or harvesting of human resources that is working on technologies that surveil people, that track people, that limit people's freedom. And the same thing with Bitcoin as well. But there also needs to be an investment of energy, development energy, into equipping people with the tools that empower them, that allow them to use Bitcoin for the reasons that we like Bitcoin and appreciate Bitcoin, rather than Bitcoin as the latest frictionless payment thing or latest fashion trend. That for me, Bitcoin is more than just about buying a drink at a bar, or any of these things. There's something bigger about Bitcoin, some bigger potential deep down, that it is a new tool of trade and business that enables new financial models that weren't before possible, and that we can use it to create new types of associations and organizations between the people that weren't before possible. Like, when you have a community with 100 people inside and they all trust one another, the things can work. But once you start to scale beyond that to 1,000 people, the trust starts to break down. So you start to need, reputation, collateral, insurance. And that's why this system we live in has been able to scale so much, because it provides us with the legal system. And the legal system gives people contractual law that they can use where maybe there isn't so much trust or personal relation involved, but they can create association between each other. But with the new crypto tools, we can actually use these features to create these things. Very interesting. And that's what we're trying to also do with the dark wallet, is looking at Bitcoin as a new tool of trade and business and thinking, okay, how can we equip people with these tools? How can we bring out these features that is inside the core of Bitcoin to the wider world? And it's a long process, because also a lot of these concepts are very abstract. And you have to try and think about, like, okay, the use cases involved, like what are the mental models that you can tie it to? When calculus was first invented by Newton, if you read the stuff he's done, it's like, it's really difficult to understand, it's very dense. But then now kids are learning calculus in high school because we have developed the models and the abstractions to more easily be able to deal with that field.
Well, here's the thing. The idea that we have an existing convenient set of laws and institutions that provide a stable society in which we live, and now we're trying to find alternatives, ways to organize, that in itself is a very Western-focused convenience that we have grown up to live in. But then there's 6 billion people who live around the world who don't even have that convenience to start with. Yeah. And the beauty is that means they don't need to subvert it. They don't need to break the habit. They don't need to come out of their comfort zone, because they don't even know what fucking comfort means. They know what survival means. You can introduce Bitcoin as a modality of organizing and trade and commerce in places where there is no modality of organizing, there is no modality of law, there is no trade and commerce amongst people, there is no international trade, there is no rule of law. And you can take them directly from that to something based on Bitcoin. If we have a developer community that has 12 developers from the core developer group who are all English-speaking males for the most part, and then you have 10,000 developers who are all Chinese, Mandarin-speaking, Russian-speaking, who speak the languages of Indonesia, or who speak, whatever. Suddenly, how important is the influence of these core developers? They get completely washed out in a huge global community of developers.
Well, it depends where the mining pools are.
But the need of the users is much bigger in countries like India and the Philippines and Indonesia and China, where you have literally 4 billion people live in that tiny circle centered around Southeast Asia. 4 billion people. How many developers there? Hundreds of thousands of developers. India has 100,000 developers graduating every single year from college, right? They get onto being interested in building new financial systems, systems that won't be in English, systems that won't care about existing structures of law. All of the things you're worried about go away. These are first world problems based on a first world convenience that we have. They don't have any of that. They can just go directly to something like Bitcoin. And do you think they're going to care about regulating this for AML, KYC to get VC investors from the fucking valley? Screw that. They're going to build something around their communities, and they're going to create momentum around that. And then you're going to be asking for your Bitcoin client to be translated from Mandarin to English so you can use it because you don't understand what the fuck is on the screen.
There's still a lot of technology that we use is coming from the West, or the developers in India actually working for companies as outsourced developers. You know?
For now, because they have to build financial systems that play with the existing banking infrastructure. But now they can write applications of their own, and they can write them directly to an open financial market of Bitcoin, and that changes the game completely. We're just at the early stages. This is going to break out in a global community, and then these problems no longer exist.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion this is a conversation that isn't quite over yet, but we're out of time, guys. Andreas, Stephanie, thank you very much for joining me. Amir, would you like to have the last word?
Thank you.
All right, guys.
I won't drag it on too much.